Hi everyone, today we will move to Australia, more precisely to the Melbourne suburb of Fitzroy. It was January 2010. This is where Chris Soteriou went to celebrate his 44th birthday with his wife, Vicki. In his worst nightmares, he could never have imagined how tragically that pleasant evening would end, and that what happened to him was far from a random attack. Christopher Soteriou was born to Greek parents who emigrated to Australia in 1976. He grew up in a working-class suburb of Reservoir, Melbourne, after moving from war-torn Cyprus with his family at the age of 12. He had a brother and two sisters, and his upbringing was shaped by both his Greek heritage and the challenges of adapting to life in Australia. After finishing school, Chris became a civil engineer and excelled in his profession. Even in his 20s, he was earning a good income. In 1991, he met Vicki Scarlatus at a gathering with mutual friends. Chris was immediately taken with her, but as he was already married, nothing came of it. Vicki left a lasting impression on him. He considered her a very attractive woman. A year later, Chris divorced his wife, who had been unfaithful. Shortly after, Vicki entered his life. She was the same age as Chris, both in their mid-20s, when they began dating. Chris was captivated by his new love. Unfortunately, his family did not share his enthusiasm. From the start, Vicki failed to gain their trust or affection. In particular, his sister Sula disliked her, believing her to be deceitful, and that, even when involved in trouble, she always emerged unscathed. Chris's brother John held a similar view, thinking Vicki liked to lie and was generally unpleasant. Chris, of course, disagreed. He considered his beloved a wonderful person and did literally everything she asked. He bought her luxury items, jewelry, designer clothes, and took her on expensive holidays. He even gave her $1,000 a week for personal expenses. In November 1994, Chris and Vicki married. The couple was deeply in love, and the groom spared no expense for his beloved. The wedding was lavish and exactly as Vicki had imagined. At the celebration, she said Chris had made her the happiest woman in the world, and Chris was visibly moved. He felt he had finally found the right woman and looked forward to a wonderful life together. 2 years later, the Soterious welcomed their first child. They dreamed of a larger family, but unfortunately, Vicki struggled to conceive again. The couple decided to try IVF, which was successful, and in 2008 they welcomed twins. Chris's married and family life seemed perfect. He was also thriving professionally. He was a high-flying engineering consultant on the national broadband network rollout, earning $600,000 a year. For the 2000 Sydney Olympics, he had been head of infrastructure for the main stadium. Vicki did not have to worry much about domestic duties. Her husband ensured she did not have to cook or clean, and a hairdresser visited twice a week to take care of her hair. Chris continued to give her whatever she desired. He loved her and the children deeply, and their happiness was his priority. Yet, apparently, it was not enough for Vicki. As early as 2005, Vicki met Tony Alexovsky, who became her lover. From the start, Vicki did not hide that she was married, and Tony did not hide that he had a girlfriend. They met secretly for intimate encounters, though Tony later admitted in an interview that it was never serious for him, just a meaningless affair. They had been seeing each other for several months, usually in motels. One night, during one such meeting, Vicki told Tony that she wanted him to kill her husband and offered him $50,000 in return. Tony admitted that he was shocked by the proposal and immediately refused. He was also unconvinced that Vicki was serious, thinking it might be a bad joke. He merely told her that if she truly felt that way and no longer loved her husband, divorce was the best solution. Shortly afterwards, Vicki ended the affair. In December 2006, Vicki turned 40. Chris did not intend to skimp on his wife's birthday. He bought her a dress worth 12,000 Australian dollars and paid for a birthday party at a casino where she celebrated with her friends. It was at this party that Vicki met her next lover, Ari Dimitrakis, a limousine driver. Vicki and Ari had known each other previously and had met briefly when Vicki was in her 20s. Their affair began then. Vicki liked sending erotic cards and messages to her lover, often ending with, "I love you, Ari. till death do us part. Interestingly, she sent identical messages to her husband. It seemed Vicki genuinely cared for her lover, showing deeper feelings. She even tattooed the letter A on her wedding finger and on the back of her neck, usually hidden by her hair. Reportedly, Ari also tattooed her name on his groin. Chris had no idea. On the 2nd of January 2010, Chris was to celebrate his 44th birthday. He was very happy, unaware that his wife was unfaithful and had years earlier asked her lover to kill him. He believed they were building a wonderful family. They had 3 healthy children and were financially well off. Chris also believed his wife loved him as much as he loved her. Nothing was lacking. That day, he received a birthday gift from Vicki, a white shirt with a card that read, "To my dearest husband, thank you for making me the happiest woman in the world. Thank you for loving me so much, the wife that adores you." She later said she was going to the shop to get milk and was gone for several hours. When she returned, a surprised Chris asked why she'd been gone so long. Vicki explained she'd gone to the bank to get money. She asked him to put on the shirt she had given him as she was taking him out to dinner. That day, Vicki decided to drive, which surprised Chris as she rarely drove, preferring him to do so. Throughout the journey, Vicki was charming and flirtatious. Chris looked forward to their evening together. However, Vicki parked some distance from the restaurant on a dark street instead of near the entrance. When Chris questioned this, she said they were running late and did not have time to find a closer spot. At 9 p.m., the couple arrived at the restaurant where Chris's friends were already waiting to celebrate his birthday. Vicki remained affectionate and attentive throughout, hugging him, showing affection, and appearing happy. Around 10:30 p.m., she left the table. Chris assumed she had gone to smoke. When she returned, she said she had been to the bathroom. She had been gone for half an hour. After dinner, Chris and Vicki began walking back to their car on Rose Street. It was 11:45 p.m., and they were carrying gift bags. Vicki asked if Chris had enjoyed his birthday, and he said he had. He thanked her for organising the dinner. They hugged and laughed as they walked. Chris was very happy. As they approached the car, Chris noticed a man nearby, appearing as though he intended to break into the vehicle. Chris approached him and asked if everything was all right. That's when he was attacked. The man slashed his throat. Chris was in shock as he felt blood streaming down his neck. Instinctively, he fought back, punching the attacker. The assailant dropped the knife and fled. Chris, fearing for Vicki's safety, shouted for her to run before collapsing. He had been stabbed 7 more times, in the abdomen, back, and chest. He felt he could not survive and told his wife he loved her and to care for the children before losing consciousness. Chris was extremely fortunate. Passers-by intervened, and a nearby doctor administered first aid until paramedics arrived. Throughout, Vicki watched in a distraught and hysterical state, yet her behaviour was strange. When a doctor tried to stop the bleeding, she pushed his hand away. At one point, the doctor had to shout at her to stop, saying he was trying to save her husband. At the time, people likely assumed Vicki was in shock, not knowing what she was doing. Unfortunately, it would soon become clear that she knew exactly what was happening. The entire event had been orchestrated by her, and the perpetrator was none other than her 48-year-old lover, Ari. When the paramedics arrived, within just 3 minutes, they transported him urgently to the hospital, where he was placed in an induced coma due to the severity of his injuries. Chris had punctured lungs, which made breathing extremely difficult. His blood pressure was dangerously low, and realistically, the chances of survival were very slim. The police informed the family that it had been a robbery gone wrong, but Chris's brother, John, did not believe it. How was it possible that Vicki had been standing right there, adorned in $50,000 worth of jewellery, and the thief hadn't taken it? Something didn't add up. Chris remained in a coma for 10 days. When he awoke, his family was overjoyed, except for one person, his wife. Vicki showed no emotion. Chris's mother-in-law assumed it was because she was depressed by the entire situation, but his sister sensed that something was wrong. Meanwhile, Vicki was disappointed that her plan had failed. She had wanted to kill her husband, inherit his fortune, and live with her lover. She had thought it was a perfect plan. Chris would die in a robbery, and no one would suspect her. After all, she had spent her whole life playing the role of a devoted wife. She played it so convincingly that even her own husband had no reason to suspect anything. Chris recalled that the first time he awoke, Vicki was crying, and he could feel her tears on his skin. She told him that once he left the hospital, she would take the children to Greece for a very long time. In the event of a divorce, she would receive just $3 million, but if her husband died, it would be $7 million. Throughout the entire ordeal, while her husband fought for his life, she sat by his bedside, playing the part of a grief-stricken wife. However, the police were able to uncover the truth fairly quickly. They traced the relationship between Vicki and Ari Dimitrakis through interviews, prior acquaintances, and records of communications, confirming both the affair and the motive. Surveillance footage from the restaurant and surrounding streets corroborated the sequence of events and the presence of the conspirators. Chris's brother already suspected who was behind the attack, but he did not want to break Chris's heart while he was still recovering. It was then that Vicki came to visit him. Reportedly, she went pale the moment Chris told her that the police already knew who was behind the attack. At that time, Chris had no idea it was his wife. Terrified, Vicki decided to contact the police and confess everything, though she continued to claim that her lover was primarily to blame, downplaying her own culpability.
Ari and I had organised it.
Okay. I don't understand why you would want your husband killed. Can you explain why?
Well, because I know it was stupid, absolutely silly, I know. I don't know.
Was it Ari?
I honestly, I don't know. I think so, but I don't know. That's all. And I'm sorry for it. I am.
Why did you want Chris dead?
Well, to be honest, I didn't really. He kept forcing me. He just kept mentioning it, and I just thought, yeah, all right. It was basically like that.
You and Vicki Soteriou planned to murder Chris Soteriou. How did Ari know where your car would be parked?
Because we had planned it.
Okay.
Upon Chris returning to his car, he then stabbed him 6 times to the body and once across the throat in an attempt to murder him.
Were you in love with Chris still?
I don't want to talk, please, Matthew.
In interviews at Richmond Police Station, footage aired showing Vicki Soteriou confessing to an affair with her husband's chauffeur, while firmly denying any conspiracy to murder. When asked by police why she would want her husband killed, she expressed regret, calling it stupid and absolutely silly, yet continued to maintain her innocence regarding the charges of conspiracy to murder and attempted murder. According to court reports, on the night of the attack, Vicki allegedly told her husband, "I've got a surprise for you," which later turned out to be a trap that led to the stabbing carried out by her lover. During police questioning, she was asked to explain this statement and the events that followed, which she did while attempting to minimize her involvement. She reportedly remained mostly silent on some aspects and defensive on others. Despite admitting to the affair, she repeatedly insisted on her innocence throughout the investigation and court proceedings, but the evidence against her ultimately led to her conviction. The courtroom was tense on the day the sentences were handed down. After months of harrowing testimony, the full extent of the plot had been laid bare. Vicki Soteriou, once a trusted partner in Chris's life, was revealed as the architect of a plan that had nearly ended it. The judge delivered a firm sentence, 12 years in prison, with a non-parole period of 9. The sentence reflected not only the danger she had placed her husband in, but also the cold calculation behind her betrayal. Ari Dimitrakis, the man who carried out the violent attack, also faced justice. Having admitted his guilt, he received a lighter sentence: 7 years in prison, with a non-parole period of 5. His plea spared him a lengthy trial, but it did nothing to lessen the horror of the crime he had committed. As the gavel fell, it marked the end of one chapter and the beginning of another, a long period of incarceration that would separate both conspirators from the life they had sought to build at the expense of Chris Soteriou. Outside the courtroom, whispers of shock and disbelief served as a reminder that betrayal often comes from those closest to us. According to a 2022 report, Vicki was quietly released from prison after serving about 10 of her 12-year sentence for conspiring to murder her husband. Media sources claim she is believed to be living with family in Melbourne's northern suburbs. Ari Dimitrakis also served his sentence and was quietly released, disappearing from the public eye. By 2014, Vicki Soteriou had lost her court battle, despite repeatedly insisting she was not guilty. Chris Soteriou spoke to Sunday Night, revealing the shocking role Vicki's family had played, attempting to twist the story and even claimed that he had plotted his own murder. By that time, Chris had moved on, enjoying life with a supportive partner and caring for his now grown children. Yet a painful rift remained. His daughter Marie, a teenager in 2014, had not spoken to him, believing that somehow her father was to blame for her mother's imprisonment. "I hope she is okay, and this is my story. This is the truth, and my door will always be open," Chris said, his eyes brimming with tears. That's it for today. Until next time.